The story of Hollywood is filled with happiness and despair, joy and tragedy, a crazy quilt of madness, sanity, laughter and tears, the desperate struggle to reach the top and the battle to remain there.
My name is Vivian Kerr, and this is Conversations with Actors.
So I guess the first thing I want to ask you is just how did you get interested in acting to begin with?
That's a long question with a long answer. My mother was a Broadway dancer and performer, and she was in a chorus line in London. So what happened is Michael Shurtleff had 3 casts, and they were all rehearsing in New York. One cast was to go to New York, one was to London, one was to LA. My mom was hoping for LA because she had kind of a burgeoning film career. And she ended up in London, where the Oliviers, she was there for winning Oliviers and has a bunch of fun stories. But performing arts have always been in my family.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so there's sad stories of me as like 2 years old doing one-woman shows, like on a staircase. But it was encouraged. And my mom enrolled me in things like dance class and singing, and I always did plays. I always wanted to be the center of attention. I think that comes from a deeper psychological need for attention from my parents, but we can talk about that later. And I ended up going to a very college preparatory school, so it was very small. My graduating class from 6th to 8th grade was 30 people, and then 9 to 12 was 60, and was super competitive. And I hated everyone there. I just couldn't find my people. It's such a small sampling of human beings. And they would do plays, and I hated everyone there. I was like, this is terrible. So my mom started enrolling us in doing community theater. And so our summer camps were doing community theater. And that's when I learned to love the rehearsal process. I loved hanging out with creative people who were weird like me. I started doing pageants because I wanted to...
That's amazing.
Yep, I wanted pretty dresses, and I was super competitive.
What was your special skill as a child? Do you have
I was singing. It was singing, which...
Oh my gosh.
My sister's such a better singer than I am, but whatever. Neither here nor there. And then because I was singing and doing pageants, because I was doing work outside of school, I started looking at programs like Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And they did this program for juniors going into their senior year. And the idea was to fire up juniors so that when they go into their senior year, they go into whatever high school program they're in, ready to invigorate classical theater into whatever program. That had the opposite effect for me. I saw my first real black box theater production. It was of Diana's son's Stop Kiss, and I was my mind exploded because it was the first time I had seen an Asian American woman just playing a normal woman. It didn't have the background story this is where she immigrated, or this is her heritage, and it was just a love story, and it blew my mind. And I was like, what have I been... I don't want to do musical theater anymore. It seems the authenticity of it, and God bless anyone who can do musical theater, that is bananas to me. To have, first off, the cardio, but second off, just the range of, talents you have to have. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
But
I
for
saw
me...
Hamilton at the Pantages, and I just thought, wow, these people are working their asses off.
Insane. And I have so much respect for that. But it didn't ring true for me as a performer. And growing up, that's all my mother knew. And so when I saw Stop Kiss and Black Box, I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to do theater like this. I want to do storytelling like this. And so that ended up having me look into theater programs. But I was not well educated. I didn't really have any formal training except for dancing and singing. What acting I did have was very presentational and awkward. It was probably the equivalent of Barbizon, if that's still around.
I remember those ads.
Yeah. But it was my small town's version of Barbizon. And some old lady who's chewing gum with her small dog. And so I ended up applying to schools in LA because I was I also at the time I thought I wanted to be a model, and I was like, this is perfect, like dreams come true here. And so I ended up going to USC. I hadn't looked at the school. I had never done an on-campus tour. I had applied. I had looked at UCLA, Loyola Marymount, NYU, UC Irvine, and I think, USC, and a couple other schools like Sarah Lawrence, a SUNY school, and USC took me, and I was like, yay, but took me as an undecided. And then my parents, being the fearful fourth generation or third, depending what you're looking at, immigrants, were like, all of a sudden this fear of like responsibility came crushing down on them, and were like, you cannot do theater. You have to do something responsible, because we're not going to throw away all this money if you're just going to like do something like pretend to be other people. So I went into USC as a freshman, undecided, took business courses, super depressed, developed a great eating disorder, hated my life, took a year off because I booked a Disneyland show called Disney's Aladdin Live Musical Spectacular.
So first of all, how did you hear about this Disney audition? And then second of all, what made you want to go to it?
I had agents in San Francisco, so I was doing modeling. Like, literally Macy's print ads where it was like, back to school. And it was like me doing like sad jean ads. But I thought, like, I was making it. Like, this was...
Sure.
I got to wear cool clothes and like...
Yeah.
Take photos.
Get paid.
So those agents were like, there's this Disney audition. I ended up booking it. It was for Princess Jasmine. And then they fired me. So I thought my life was made. I had like moved down to the OC. I was like, bye school.
Was this for Disneyland?
This was for Disneyland. It was for Disney's California Adventure. They had, I think, just opened the park.
And then how did you get fired? Like, what are the rehearsals even like for a Disney show?
So the rehearsals, they're great big rehearsal rooms that are state of the art, and it's like any major Broadway production, except it's condensed into, I think, 45 minutes. So it was like all the hits of Aladdin smushed.
Gotcha. And they have like an outdoor stage or something that you do them?
No, this was an indoor. They had built an indoor stage for this, and like a magic carpet that like went over the audience. Someone died during tech. Like, they fell off the magic carpet.
Oh my god.
Anyways, I got fired because I've been thinking a lot about this, but it's really, I don't think I had the training. I don't think I had the stamina, and I was super young and insecure. I was like 19. And
Wait, you were fired like after it opened or during the rehearsal process?
Right before we opened. Like, we had gotten costumes. We were just moving into the theater, and they're like, let's come here. And I was like, my life is over, which is so funny. To like,
and how did they, like, what was the reason they gave you?
They were like, we just don't think you're a good fit.
And you were like, I'm wearing the Jasmine costume right now.
I was literally, I remember sobbing and being like, what is my life? Which is so pathetic now. But like, when you're 19, that's you only have 19 years of life.
Yeah.
Like, and I love I'm from California. I love Disneyland, and it was like my dream, which is so silly now.
What would so if you like had done that show, like is that like a full-time job? Like you would have done that show for like months and months and months?
Like at least a year.
Wow.
Or whatever. It was, you're a full-time employee. And they had multiple casts because it goes, I think they end up doing like 4 or 5 shows a day. So it's like the schedule of a Broadway performance, except it's 7 days a week. And so they had like 2 alternating casts and then like a bunch of understudies. But for me, I was like, I've made it. Oh no, I haven't made it.
Oh my gosh.
But everyone who was there had come off of TV, film, theater, and they were like, I'm just trying to make the bills. And the people who had longevity were the people who had some sort of training, whether it was conservatory or through theater, training at a university. And so I went back to USC, and this is back when like you just had to sign a sad piece of paper. And I was like, I'm in the theater school now. Like, there was no audition. They were like, okay, we'll take you. That's how I ended up at SC, and then I found my people. I found my tribe, and it was...
Did you feel like it was hard to kind of go back after being gone? I didn't know that.
No,
actually, that you've
not
been
at
gone.
all.
I think I must not have met you until after you came back.
Yeah, I started off basically with the freshman class, and I just tried, because I had done a great majority of my prerequisites my freshman year because I had no idea what I was going to do. I was able to really just like run into the theater program at USC. It was great. I was commuting from Burbank. That sucked. But it was incredible because I was like, oh my God, these people are my age, and everyone's so full of like hope and joy and excitement, and everyone's sharing in that enthusiasm, and it was so contagious and infectious and just lovely. I can't speak like more highly of that time of my life. Just meeting like-minded people. I'd never had that in my life. And like, oh my God, you're a theater nerd? I'm a theater nerd. But not in like a creepy way. Not in like, well, I love Rent. You love Rent. Let's all sing Rent. Like, or I feel like now it's Hamilton. Now it's like Hamilton. Where they like, I feel like people have Hamilton battles. That was never for me.
When you were sort of going back and taking classes, when do you feel like you started learning more about acting, or when do you feel like your acting changed away from being that kind of presentational kind of kid stuff?
I met my husband Ira doing a community theater play as favors to people we both knew, and he was at a program at Cal State Fullerton, and which had juries, which is basically like you audition every year to see whether or not you still stay in the program.
Wow.
And they have cuts. And I remember listening to him talk about acting and being like, whoa, mind explosion. Because he talked about it in a way I'd never heard people talk about, which is what they were doing at Cal State Fullerton. That is when I started patterning my classes, not off of what USC wanted me to do, but more so off of what his class load was like and what the BFA class load was like at USC. And that's when I started noticing a change in my acting, because I started taking things like voice and movement, and I started taking classes with teachers who weren't necessarily like the most popular, but I resonated with. And it was more so listening. It was now an awareness of listening to what my learning style was, versus who was popular with whatever group of students at the time.
Was there someone in particular that you felt like you learned the most from while you were there?
Yeah, I think there are two teachers. Stacy Chaikin, who I think she only does one woman performances now. Her dedication to listening to story and the authenticity of storytelling blew my mind. And the other person was Mary Jo Negro, who was part of the first graduating class of Juilliard, and her dedication to really combing through text, again, was like, what? Oh, that's what we do? Deborah Zane, she was influential in that she would call me out on my shit, but I felt that kind of confrontational learning style.
You mean Laura Zane?
Laura Zane,
yeah.
I'm so sorry. Laura Zane. Deborah Zane is a casting director.
I know, it's like Deborah Zane's a casting director.
She's fantastic. But that kind of confrontational style has never really worked with me. I need to be coddled. I need to be told, like, you're a good human.
No, I think that's, I think that's true for a lot of people. I think it's very hard to feel safe enough to try something if you're worried that if you do something, quote unquote wrong, someone's going to come down on you.
Yeah, and some people thrive in that, man. Some people, like my husband, really thrived with this one teacher named Svetlana, who, if you can't tell from her name, super Russian, and she was just like relentless. But I was like, if she was my teacher, I would have literally nervous breakdowns probably every class, and not in like a healthy, like, this is bringing me to another point in my like life, but like probably to a point of probably being hospitalized.
Oh gosh, yeah. After you graduated USC, did you feel like there was a big learning curve when you started working in film and TV?
I definitely think there was a huge learning curve between graduating from USC and actually being on the job. I don't think necessarily these university programs prepare students for actually working on set. I think they're really great at preparing you for classics, but like you're never gonna play a 50-year-old woman from like some weird Irish play that your program decided to put on because it had 10 women in it, and they had a huge class of women, and you're in that respect, theater school does not prepare anyone well enough. It was a lot of learning on the job and a lot of like just shutting up and like watching the people who've done this for a long time, watching what they did, making sure that you hit your mark, that you... For me, when I realized that when the camera is running, it becomes about time is money. When I realized that, and I was like, oh, this is basically like every minute that goes by are like thousands of dollars, I put that pressure on myself, but it also made me like be more efficient in how I was on camera and how I prepared my stuff for the next day. Because before I would just show up and be like, we'll rehearse and play. And then being like, oh no, you had to show up ready to go. And university didn't do that for me.
That is so true. That is really interesting. You do not learn that you're going to do all of your rehearsal by yourself or with a coach, but that absolutely, like, you're showing up to set and it's opening night.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that maybe it's changed now. Maybe they're doing more of that. I don't know.
I don't know how you can prepare people for that, except if you had like a interdisciplinary thing where like the cinema school is involved, because how do you create that environment?
It has to be a soundstage. It has to be, you're right.
You have to have like 40 people
staring at you,
eating a sandwich and looking bored out of their minds. And then people with headsets on listening to everything you're saying and like rolling their eyes, checking their phones. You know what I mean? Like, that is the only way to prepare you.
That would be an amazing class.
So what I'm saying, Vivian, is we have a brand new business.
It'd be an amazing class. It really would.
It's all true, though.
Yeah. With like trailers just outside the soundstage and like a PA who wants to like come get you.
Oh, yeah. And like oddly clicky tables at lunch where you just don't know where to sit. So then you just end up eating alone in your trailer because you just feel awkward.
And then you're like, does everyone think I'm antisocial or a jerk?
Right. Alone? And then you're like walking to your car and then you're like calling whoever you're close to in the car and like telling them all of this and then being like, it's fine. This is just fine. And you're like sobbing. Yeah, that's a great class.
Oh my gosh, it would be a good class.
But no, I don't think directly from theater school to my first job I was prepared. No.
So yeah, I was gonna say. So after you graduated, did you do the showcase, or how did you get representation and start going on auditions?
So I am a woman of color, and that tends to be an easier sell to get representation right now in Hollywood. I also think the BFA class that year was very, very Caucasian. And so if I remember clearly, it was me, two people of Latino descent, and maybe a person of color, a black person. I met my agents, who I'm still with, through the showcase. And then from there, I booked my first equity job with them out in Arizona. And I was like, I made it!
What was your first equity job?
It was, what was it called?
Is that Arizona Theater Company?
Arizona Theater Company. They're no longer around. No, the Actors Theater Company in Phoenix. And it was for the incredible design of Jenny Chow, which was a play about a girl who was adopted who basically had agoraphobia and couldn't leave her house, so she built a robot to meet her birth parents. I played the robot.
Awesome.
Obviously a dream come true for me.
When you were doing that play, did you think, I'm just going to keep doing more plays after this? Or did you have an intention of, when this is done, I want to go back to LA and start doing more camera work?
I was very open to any of it, to be honest. After that play, I ended up booking a pilot called Women's Murder Club, which got picked up. And then they reworked my role and gave it to someone like a good 10 years older than me. But that was heartbreak. And then the writer's strike happened, and then everyone was screwed. And that affected film and TV for years. I can't remember why I started telling this story, so I'm glad.
I was just asking about sort of like, how you got your agent and then like how you sort of found your first sort of jobs. So it was your first on-camera job, Women's Murder Club?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So when what was sort of the experience of working on that? Did people kind of mentor you and help you a little bit, or were you just sort of pretending you knew what you were doing and figuring it out as you went?
Full on pretending. I lied. My first on-camera job was for The Young and the Restless. And I played like a computer tech. And for soaps, you basically get one take now. Mm-hmm. They were so sweet. They gave me 2 takes because I was so, like, nervous. I think I was like, let me look at your computer. Something really random. But for Women's Murder Club, it was definitely, I just pretended. And I just sat there and I watched. And I remember one of my co-stars, Laura Harris. She was so kind to me. And she really took me under her wing. Mm. I just remember watching all these other, because it was a female ensemble, and watching all these other women do their roles and being like, okay, that's what I have to do. This is what they're doing. This is what I need to do. And then in between takes, like, what am I supposed to do? Oh, yeah, I should be doing whatever they're doing. Mm-hmm. I wish we had an apprenticeship program, like in the UK.
I think it's just really hard because you don't get to experience what it's like to work until you have a job, and then you're so worried about doing your job. I almost wish that there was something where maybe schools could do like a field trip or something. But you're right, because it is like money, so no one's going to be like, we don't want this boatload of kids coming into our like set, or like we're trying to work.
Right.
But yeah, it is. I think there is a steep learning curve for sure. Who do you feel has taught you the most about acting? Do you feel like there's a specific acting teacher? Do you feel like there's an actor you worked with? Or maybe even a director? Or do you feel like it was Ira, actually?
I believe it was my husband, Ira. He's one of the most talented actors I've ever met. Unfortunately, Hollywood did not see potential. Watching him work was such an experience. And then now working with him, he coaches me on a lot of my auditions. There's a shorthand that comes with it. But watching his confidence and his dedication to the story was really... And watching him do, like, the grunt work of it, that's what made me... That was a big turning point for me. The other person who really... I don't know if it would be other person, but I would have to say just honestly watching a lot of television and film and deciding really investigating why do I like this show more than I like whatever show, or why did this performance affect me more than something else. And because I'm such a bloodhound sometimes when it comes to acting stuff, like I get deep into the internet click hole of it. Like, so for instance, I was thinking about this on the drive over here, like, what is a performance that's, like, stayed with me? And it would have to be, like, Marion Cotillard's in Vie En Rose. Mm. She has that one scene, I think it's just one solid take, where she finds out her lover is dead, even though her lover, spoiler alert, she imagines his ghost there.
Right, I remember that.
It's this long take, and you see the realization on Marion Cotillard's face of, like, extreme joy that her lover is there, and then walking into this room where they're like, he's dead, and she was the one who had asked him to come early and had died in a plane crash, and then seeing just the range of emotions and me being like, it really shook me to my core, and then, like, watching it over and over and over again, and then reading the script, and then, seeing, like, okay, how did she do that? And then literally listening and reading interviews about her process, and then it was like, oh, okay. And to me, those are the bigger learning moments for me. Mm. Those were the ones where, and I think it's also part of it because I was doing the work, I was sniffing around, so it felt much more personal and not just like, I'm paying a teacher to tell me what to do.
Right.
It became because I was genuinely invested in investigating the actual process. I felt like I learned more. And then in terms of applying that, that's a whole nother, like, it ends up being me just going up on camera and just doing it over and over and over again and watching myself in playback. And I hate it. I hate watching myself in playback.
When you prepare for a role, do you tape yourself before you, like, you're saying when you're working on set, you're watching playback? Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. So you're fine watching, you can watch you could watch dailies, you could watch yourself on camera.
I make myself do it, yes.
Do you really?
Yeah, it's awful.
No, I think it's fascinating because I think it's always interesting if people can't watch themselves and can't get anything from it, or they have to, like they find it really helpful. Do you, have you ever worked on anything where you didn't want to look at yourself, or it's always been edifying?
It depends by project. Sometimes a lot of it is the trust in the production team and the director. I always want to learn, so I would rather make myself sit through watching myself on tape, which is, you can't see it, but I like literally closed my eyes and like grimaced. I would rather do that than have the editor pick, or like not learn and not give myself what I feel is like a fair chance at what I want the performance to be, or like the truth of that moment to be.
Do you feel like when you watch yourself, you can tell, like if you're doing a self-tape and you're taping up, like let's say you do 3 or 4 different takes, can you tell without anyone else giving feedback what you think is the best take?
You mean like before watching it?
Like after kind of watching back, like do you feel like you can like objectively tell when your acting is good?
Yes. I do. I can be very presentational with comedy. It's like I can sometimes paint by numbers, which I hate. And so I can tell when I'm doing that and when I'm not. And it is really interesting because if I give it to other people without telling them like what's my favorite take, it's always the same.
It's actually kind of amazing that you can like tell that about yourself. I mean, I feel like I'm always like sending takes to like my sister, or like being like, pick one, I can't do it. Like,
I'm usually pretty good about narrowing it down, but I think as a woman, and especially a woman of color, I've taught to be very much like second guess yourself all the time. You're never right. And so trusting that instinct is really hard for me, which is why I always have to be like, I think it's this, but just in case I'm wrong, I'll show it to like 10 other people.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day too, it's like how big a difference is there really going to be between like one take and the other, you know?
Yes.
You're just throwing darts on the dartboard.
Oh my God. And not even like a dartboard, like a black hole. Like you hope the dart gets over there. You're not sure. You're like screaming into this abyss and you're like, I hope you hear it. I hope this is what you wanted.
How do you feel like, are you good at kind of just letting like every audition be an audition, or do you have a harder time if it's something that you really want that you're auditioning for?
Oh man. I feel like I've been doing this for a while now, and every time I get excited about a role where I'm like, this speaks to my life, like I just graduated college, this character just graduated college, like they have a mom, I have a mom, like this is it. Every time I fall in love with a character, I never get it. And so I've kind of trained myself to be very, very careful about falling in love with stuff. I can fall in love with the work, but falling in love with the character is really hard for me because in a numbers game, it's very unlikely I'll book I'll book it. It's just how numbers work. Meaning, if I do 10 auditions, maybe I'll book one if I'm lucky, right? And so of those 10, if I fall in love with them, that means 10 breakups, 10 like sad rejection, disappointment. And so I've learned to kind of safeguard my heart and to fall in love with the work and the process, but having to be like, we have to have an emotional like wall here or else I will go crazy and just cry all the time.
Yeah, that sounds like a healthier way to be.
I think so.
I would like to be in that boat. I'm not there yet. But.
And I'm going to be completely honest. I had an audition yesterday that I had worked really hard on. I got into the room. I don't think I gave it my best, and I'm still thinking about it. But I try to go into the room, remember what happened, have a recall, be like, what could I have done better? Did I book it? Did I not? Usually I'm pretty straight on if I booked it or not. And then let it go and like not talk about it. But guys, it lingers.
Yeah, the lingering is real. It's so funny. There's always like the one, like I think there's a pilot from like 2 years ago. I'm going to cut this out. There's a pilot from like 2 years ago that I remember reading and being like, I love this. And just because the world of it was so exciting. And I was like, just to be in that world would be so incredible. And then they made the pilot and it didn't get picked up. So I was like, so sad, yeah. It's always every year my favorite pilots are the ones that they either that don't get picked up to series. Like my favorite ones.
When you say your favorite pilots, do you mean like you've read the pilot or you've watched the pilot?
Read it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not the best at it, but if like at least the drama scripts, I try to read the ones that I think are really interesting sounding. Like the logline sounds interesting to me. I try to read the script, the full script, even though I don't have an audition, just because I'm curious about it. And so many of them are dumpster fire.
It's always interesting. I guess I ask that because I'm always curious, like, from what you imagine it being to what it actually became. If you saw the pilot and what they created, if you would have been like, oh yeah, I would have picked that up.
And that's the thing, you never know. I mean, something could be, a great script can be turned into a god-awful pilot, you know?
Oh, yes.
Depending on the casting, depending on the CGI, depending on, you know what I mean? Like a number of reasons
Yes.
that you're like, the budget, you know, it just, of course, like, and sometimes things just like, I think tonally don't work, you know? There's shows on that I watched today that it's like everybody is sort of playing in one playground, and then there's like one actor who you're like, is just not in the same world as everyone else, but you're like, the show's just going to keep going, but you're like, you can see someone is miscast. I'm putting all this shit out.
No, don't. This is fascinating to me, this stuff. You do you, Vivian. It's your podcast.
It's my podcast.
You do what you want. You're your own
true.
independent lady.
I am that. What is your favorite role that you've ever done?
I think it's so interesting because right now I'm thinking about on set. So meaning, like, I'm not thinking necessarily about roles, but like the best time I've had working on something. But I think my favorite role, man, that's a tough one. I think my favorite role would probably be a short I did called Kilo, where I played a cop. It's not my best acting work, but it was the first time I was a lead, and I remember really falling in love with the process of independent film and the story and the writers and the directors, and having candid conversations about character. It felt like a real collaborative process, which is something I hadn't had before. I'd say that, and then, I mean, most recently Disjointed, only because I got to do 20 episodes and really explore a character, which I haven't had the opportunity to do unless I've been doing a play. And even then, I feel like plays, you can only get through so much story, and then you had to repeat over and over again. And then with Disjointed, we got 20 episodes to really flesh out character, which was very satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of my favorite acting role, probably Kilo, because that was a big moment for me, being the captain of a ship. Genuinely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's super different, right, when you're doing TV versus film. Like TV, like, it's amazing how little interaction you have with the director.
Yeah.
You know, which is crazy because they're the director, but they're not really in charge. You know, you end up communicating way more with the producers. Like, the directors just come and go. Yeah. And it's like, it was lovely working with you. You know, like, yeah. And then you, like, never see them again.
Yeah.
So if when you get an audition, let's say you have an audition for a series regular and a 1 hour drama, and you have 3 days to work on it.
I get 3 days?
Yeah, I'm being
what?
nice to you.
Vivian?
I know, I'm being nice to you. Let's say you have, all right, two.
Oh.
48 hours, we'll say
Wow.
that. What do you do? Like, how do you work on it? What is sort of your process? And is it always sort of the same process, or does it kind of change depending on the role or the script?
It's
the
pretty
number of
much
days?
it's pretty much the same. I freak out. I start getting stressed. I start rearranging my day. Usually, if it's a pilot, they'll have a script. If not, then I try to beg, borrow, and steal for a script. I read the script, and then I try to figure out what the character, so if I'm auditioning for a character, where that character fits in that story. So what does that character serve in terms of telling this pilot? And then I look at the sides. It's usually, if it's drama, it's like 10 fucking pages of monologue, and you're like, why? You only need to see me for like a minute to know whether or not this is right, and now we're all gonna have to sit in a room for 5 minutes.
The best, though, is when you prepare like 10 pages and they're like, oh, just this is the first 2. And you're like, okay, I'm glad I stayed up all night. Like,
yeah, you're like, cool.
but like the third one's the one you like really wanted to do.
Right, or they're like, pick one, but we recommend scene 1. And you're like, great, I can't wait to do scene 1. Then I sit with the script for about 40 minutes. I had a teacher who told me I could memorize anything in 40 minutes. Before, it used to take me like 3 to 4 hours. And now, because for some reason I've said like 40 minutes, I can now just do it. Is it perfect? No. But I think because I give myself a time limit, I'm so much more laser beam focused. When I'm learning lines, I tend to use my phone, and I record the other person's lines.
Oh, do you?
And I learn them by route. I have to. It's, for some reason, I have this mental block. If I don't learn the lines, I can't be present. So I learn the lines, and usually I'm doing some sort of like paper crafting or like something with my hands, because I'm such I have such like the monkey brain going on, like, look, it's something shiny, like what's on Facebook, what's on Instagram. So if I give myself a task like coloring, like doing embroidery, like cutting something out of paper, that way that part of my brain can stay silent and busy, and then the learning part of just route learning happens. After I route learn, then I typically run the scene with a coach or my husband, and I just read it, and then I break it down by beats, like, and then I try to figure out what is the actual scene. Like, is it an interrogation? Like, is it about the mother-son relationship? Is it, whatever. And then I work on it with my husband. It depends. It feels like some scripts are harder for me to click into, almost like a ski boot into a ski. Sometimes it just doesn't click, and I had to like literally bang my head against a wall, and then I had to take a break.
What do you feel like doesn't click about like the point of view of the?
It's usually
character,
like I can't figure out why someone is saying, like, why my character is saying or doing something, and so I'm pushing it. I'm like forcing the circle into the square, and I'm like, yeah, this will work, and it's not true. It's not telling the story correctly or in an interesting way, and I'm frustrated, and that's all that's gonna show. So then I had to take a break, and then I usually like get upset, and I'm like, oh, never act again, and like I sit down with a cup of tea, and then I'm petting my dog, and I'm like furious at myself, and then I calm down, and then I apologize to my husband because I probably yelled at him at some point, like, you don't know what you're doing. And then he's like, it's okay, this is your process. I'm like, why am I a terrible person to you? And then we come back to it, and then it's like, oh, I was approaching it from like over here, and I should have looked at it from over here. And then I sleep on it, and the next day I'll lightly run it, if we have 2 days, right? And then the day of the audition, I'll wake up, I'll figure out how long I need to get ready. I usually try to give myself half an hour to an hour to try to either run it with my husband if he's around, or if not, I will take my phone out and I will record it. I'll play back the voice, and then I'll have like the camera going on my computer, and I'll black out the screen. So I'll like simulate an audition, because I tend to fail miserably on any first take. It's a weird tick I have, and I hate it. So I try to get that first take out of the way before I leave the house. And then I go in my car, I sit in the waiting room, I say hi to friends, I try not to freak myself out, I try to have laser beam focus, I go in, I either do my job or I don't, and then I leave.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and then we try to let it all go. We try being the operative word.
Definitely try. Is there a kind of role that you haven't gotten the chance to play yet, or a kind of story that you really want to tell that you haven't been able to yet?
I really want to do an action blockbuster. Like, badly want to do it. I am not in the physical shape to do it, but I love those kinds of movies.
Like what examples?
Like any superhero, or even something like like an Independence Day, or like Day After Tomorrow, like San Andreas.
Big budget disaster.
Like, I just want to act in front of a green screen and like running and
stunts.
Like just not only stunts, but like just the most terrible dialogue having to say to like some crazy event that's happening. And not even terrible dialogue, but just the idea of having to like run from Godzilla. Like, how do you do? I don't know. I haven't done it yet. Or like running from Godzilla while trying to say exposition seems like
right,
just terrifying, but also like the most fun.
You're like riding away. You're like King Kong Skull Island. Like you've got like helicopters going off.
Right. We have helicopters going off. I'm covered in dirt, which sounds terrible, but also like really fun. I hope that I have special effect makeup, like I've lost an arm.
There's something really like joyous and little kid like about that. Like it feels like you're playing in your backyard and you're like muddy and like you've skinned your knee, but you don't care.
I was just thinking that it really is that immersive experience, but playing with other people's money.
Sometimes a lot of them.
And so those are the movies I love to watch in theaters, and that's what I would love. Like Guardians of the Galaxy, Thor just came out. Like there's so many great examples of that storytelling that is actually really fun and really well done. That I would love to be a part of, and I've tried so hard, but I just don't think the fit hasn't happened yet, guys.
Have you ever written like a crazy letter? Like, you know, those letters that's like, this is my dream. Like, if you could just see me for 5 minutes. Like, you know.
Oh, I've done one better than that. Sure, why not? We'll just tell it, because I have zero fucks to give. I took this class with this woman named Dallas Travers, and she was like, self-empower yourself. Just go out and make your opportunities happen. And to some extent, that works for other people. And it didn't work for me. The book Hunger Games had just come out, and it wasn't as big as it became, but I was obsessed with it. And I was like, I have to be a part of this series. And I had found out who had optioned it. And I had found out their phone number, and I called them.
That's amazing.
No, it's terrible. It shouldn't have happened. And I was like, hey, so when auditions happen, like, who should I blah, blah, blah. It was like, like looking back now, I'm like, never have done that.
Were they like really like generous with you, or did they hang up on you right away?
It was someone's assistant who was very sweet, who was like, well, we haven't really like started the process, but you know, just keep an eye on insert like deadline, whatever, you know. And then I ended up telling my team, but they were like, okay, you crazy actor.
That's so funny. Oh my God. I love that though. Well, because I think, you know, people do stuff like that, and like nobody, I don't know. I think you have to do a little bit of that. I agree. It's like sometimes, even though obviously like calling someone. I'm so sorry. No.
You should laugh, because it was like.
No, but the thing is like there is the 1 time in 10 when it works.
Oh, I don't even think in 10.
And
like
then but I feel like then that story gets passed around, and then you're like, oh, well, like it worked for them.
I remember I had a friend who walked up and down Hollywood and Highland in a sandwich board with her headshot and resume on it. Because she thought that was the way, like, the desperate things we do. Because we go crazy here. Because you have no control over anything. Do you know what I mean? And so it's like, at what level of crazy do you commit to?
Yeah.
In your desperate time? Of like, I'm going to manifest this.
Have you ever been, like, so desperate, like, have you ever seriously thought about quitting acting?
Oh my God, like, at least,
like,
at least twice a month. Easily twice a month. We can talk about dead time. Like, there are years where I don't book stuff. And I'm like, well, I guess that one guest star on Grey's was it. Like, that was the peak of your life. So enjoy it.
What's the longest you've gone without working?
Probably 2 years, but that really was the writer's strike. And also me being, like, living out my early 20s and, like, partying very, very hard. And you're like, why can't I book stuff? Like, you look dead. Like, you don't remember what's happening. Like, these are the reasons why you should not be an adult. But yeah, there have been dry times, and that's when you get desperate and you do things like call people up and wear a sandwich board on Hollywood and Highland.
What do you do when you're not acting to stay creative? How do you fill your time?
I really leaned into doing arts and crafts. Something that I noticed is when you're a writer, you can print out your pilot script, even though that in itself is so ephemeral. But auditions are even more ephemeral. I can't go to an audition and be like, can I have that tape so I can show my friends, like, I accomplished something today? Like, you don't get to have that validation. And I physically wanted something in my hands. So I leaned into arts and crafts where I could create something in a couple hours or a couple days, where I could see the efforts of my creativity and being like, oh, I can tangibly hold this in my hands. And that ended up becoming a bigger project where then I was like, what if I did this on YouTube? And I started learning how to edit and do voiceover. And so I started like an arts and crafts YouTube channel to teach myself how to edit, to teach myself how to do voiceover work. And then I realized very quickly I was not the best at arts and crafts, but I could be the sassiest. And then that ended up leading me into creating community with this whole group of artists who are like, they call themselves paper crafters, and it's this whole weird tiny niche that are both lovely and crazy at the same time. And so that's what I ended up funneling my energy towards. That and reading a lot. When I have downtime, I am an avid like book reader. I watch too much television for my own good, but I call it homework.
Research.
It's research.
And then I guess we'll sort of wrap it up with this. Do you, I mean, it's like cliche, but instead of asking you like what advice you would give other people, has anyone ever given you good advice, or is there anything you've sort of witnessed or seen that you were like, this would be something good for younger actors to know?
There's a book that I would recommend to read when you're feeling sad. It's Letters to a Young Artist by Anna Devere Smith. She writes a lot of great letters that I think younger artists would, and people who've been in the business, can really benefit from listening to. It's like listening to an old friend and being like, oh, okay, I'm not going crazy and I could still be creative. The piece of advice that I wish someone had told me would be, as an actor, your job is to audition. That really never came across to me in terms of film and television and theater eventually, but more so film and TV, that the prize is getting to work on set and getting to be creative, but your real job is to audition. And I wish someone had told me that, because I didn't really figure that out until much later. And then once I figured out, oh, I had to be good at auditioning in order to do what I really want to do, which is act, that became that route became much more clear for me. And then my preparation for the audition became much more clear. And I wish someone had told me that.
Conversations with Actors is produced by me, Vivian Kerr. You can find out more about our guests at conversationswithactors.com. Please rate us in iTunes if you have a moment and hit subscribe. You can reach me at conversationswithactors@gmail.com if you have any questions or comments. Thank you very much for listening.